My father told me I was only invited because my mother felt sorry for me. He said it at 7:18 p.m. in the dining room of a white colonial house in Boise, while 26 relatives stood within hearing distance and pretended the ice in their glasses had suddenly become fascinating. I was holding a wrapped box with a silver fountain pen inside, the same model he had once pointed to in a magazine and said real executives use things like that because cheap pens made cheap decisions. The room smelled like prime rib, fireplace smoke, and the lemon polish my mother used whenever she wanted the house to look richer than it was. No one defended me. My brother Grant laughed into his bourbon like our father had just delivered the toast of the decade. My sister Lauren tilted her head, the way she did when she wanted sympathy for someone else's cruelty, and said, "Dad, come on," in a voice soft enough to count as support, only if you had never been supported before. My mother adjusted the gold napkin rings one by one, even though every place setting was already perfect, and my father kept staring at my dark green parka as if my coat had insulted him more than his sentence had insulted me. I smiled anyway. Not because I was fine, not because I was forgiving, not because I was used to it, although I was. I smiled because 2 days earlier, at 9:42 in the morning, Red Pine Community Bank had emailed me a packet of loan documents carrying my signature on 6 different pages. None of those signatures were mine. The documents involved the old cabin on Priest Lake, the one my grandfather had left to me alone, the one everyone in my family still called our place, because possession sounded better than theft when said warmly enough. According to the file, Whitaker Legacy Retreats, my father's event company, was applying for a $2.4 million credit facility secured partly by property I owned outright. According to the file, I had consented to the collateral, approved commercial redevelopment, and authorized the company to present the land as a family-controlled asset. According to the file, I had agreed to disappear from my own deed. I had spent 13 years as an emergency preparedness coordinator for a hospital network across Idaho and eastern Washington. My job was to imagine failure before failure arrived. Wildfires blocking evacuation routes, cyber attacks shutting down medication systems, winter storms freezing oxygen deliveries on Interstate 84, diesel shortages, generator failures, water contamination, missing signatures, wrong authority, bad assumptions. Every plan began with the same questions. Who has legal control? Where is the original document? What happens if the person everyone trusts is lying? It took me too long to ask those questions at home. My grandfather, Thomas Reed, bought the Priest Lake property in 1978, long before the shoreline was crowded with vacation houses and private docks. It was 31 acres of pine, granite, cold water, and quiet. The cabin itself had cedar walls, green metal roofing, a stone fireplace, and a narrow loft where rain sounded like fingers tapping on a desk. He had built shelves into every room, labeled the electrical panel in block letters, and kept cassette recordings in a locked cabinet beside his fishing maps. I was the grandchild who showed up. Grant showed up for holidays when beer was stocked and the boat was running. Lauren showed up when she needed family photos that looked rustic enough for clients, but expensive enough for Instagram. I showed up when Grandpa needed prescriptions picked up, gutters cleaned, firewood stacked, and someone patient enough to listen while he explained why people who confuse kindness with surrender eventually lose both. He left the cabin to me, not to my mother, not to all 3 grandchildren, not to a family trust. His will said the property was to remain the sole and separate asset of Abigail Whitaker, free from claims by relatives, spouses, partnerships, corporations, successors, or any family-controlled entity, unless I granted written permission before a notary. At 27, I thought the wording was excessive. At 35, I understood it was love. My father hated that will from the moment it was read. He told everyone Grandpa had been manipulated by illness. He said I got the cabin because I was delicate, which was Whitaker language for someone who noticed receipts. Grant said the inheritance split was unfair because he had always been expected to carry the family name. Lauren said I should place the cabin into a shared entity so everyone could heal. My mother cried for 3 weeks until I agreed to let the family keep using it during summers. That was my first mistake. My second mistake came 4 years later when my father founded Whitaker Legacy Retreats and asked to hold leadership weekends at the property. He called them small gatherings. Then he called them executive renewals. Then he called them legacy experiences. I created a 1-year renewable license because paperwork was the only language I trusted, and the license said no structural changes, no subleasing, no commercial representation of ownership, no borrowing, no lien, no development, and no client event without written approval. My father treated restrictions like suggestions written by someone poor. At first, the violations were dressed in soft clothes. A brochure called the cabin Our Private Northern Lodge. Grant brought software clients there without asking and left cigar burns on the porch rail. Lauren staged wine glasses on Grandpa's dock and used the photos to sell luxury retreats in places she did not own. My parents replaced 2 couches, then argued that their furniture meant they had invested in the property. Whenever I objected, my father sighed and asked when I had become so transactional. I had been transactional since they taught me love required invoices. 3 weeks before his birthday, a courier left an envelope at my apartment building. It contained an appraisal notice from Red Pine Community Bank for parcel PRL-31-776, the legal description of the cabin and surrounding acreage. The bank believed Whitaker Legacy Retreats was seeking a revolving credit line to support expansion into heritage hospitality venues. I thought it was a clerical error until I saw the authorization page. My full name appeared beneath a blue signature that tried to imitate the way I curved the second G in Abigail. It failed by 3 millimeters. I called the bank's fraud department from my kitchen table while my coffee burned on the warmer and the refrigerator hummed too loudly behind me. I gave them the license agreement, the deed number, my grandfather's probate file, and the dates of every authorized company use. Then I requested the full application packet. The woman on the phone became careful after the first 6 minutes. Careful voices are how professionals scream. 2 days later, the file arrived. My father had signed a declaration stating that the cabin was a family-controlled commercial property. Grant had submitted revenue projections showing $890,000 in future corporate retreats over 36 months. Lauren had attached architectural renderings of something called Reed Ridge Lodge, with my grandfather's cabin converted into a reception hall beside 12 glass guest suites, private boat slips, and a wellness pavilion. Someone had attached a copy of my driver's license from a prior insurance packet, and someone had forged my signature again beneath a statement consenting to collateral use. The loan had not closed. That mattered. It did not save them. The bank had already issued temporary credit based on preliminary approval, and Whitaker Legacy Retreats had spent part of it on deposits, marketing, tax arrears, event staffing, and a contract with a medical device company expecting a July retreat at the cabin. When I read that, I sat very still. The apartment smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. My hands were not shaking anymore. That was worse. I called Hannah Price, an estate attorney I had met after a wildfire evacuation contract went sideways at work. Hannah was not dramatic. She did not gasp. She did not call anyone evil. She placed the documents in order, asked for a handwriting sample from my last 5 notarized forms, and said, "Do you want the relationship preserved, the property preserved, or your future preserved? Because your family has created a situation where all 3 may not fit inside the same room." I wanted to hate that question. Instead, I answered it. A conservation organization had been trying to acquire adjoining shoreline for nearly a year. They wanted to protect osprey nesting grounds, restrict commercial construction, and convert existing structures into field education stations. My father had dismissed them because he believed the land would be worth more once Whitaker Legacy Retreats became regional. Hannah contacted them quietly. They still had donor funding. They could close fast. They also understood what a recorded conservation easement meant. No resort, no lodge, no second chance for someone else to sell my permission. The night before my father's birthday, I listened to one of Grandpa's old recordings. The tape hissed before his voice came through, thin but steady, like wind under a door. He said, "If they ever make you pay rent on your own dignity, Abby, leave the house. A gift is not a gift if you have to keep buying it back from people who think love means access." I played that sentence 3 times. Then I went to the party. I brought the pen because some part of me still wanted to be gracious. I wore my parka because Boise was cold, and because I had stopped dressing for rooms that measured daughters by fabric. I let my father insult me in front of everyone, and I watched each person choose comfort over courage. The sound that stayed with me was not his voice. It was the tiny clink of my mother's fork against porcelain as she pretended not to hear. That sound ended my hesitation. I set the unopened gift beside the guest book. I took 1 sip of sparkling water. I looked at my father and said, "Happy birthday!" Then I left before dinner, walked through the January dark to my car, and called Hannah from the driveway. My breath fogged the windshield. My phone screen glowed against my palm. "Start everything," I said. 5 days later, at 10:11 a.m., on Thursday, the cabin sold to Northern Ridge Land Trust for $1.71 million after reserve taxes and fees. The conservation easement recorded 6 minutes later. Red Pine Community Bank froze the temporary credit line and restricted all accounts connected to the collateral application. Hannah sent preservation letters to my parents, Grant, Lauren, and Whitaker Legacy Retreats. At 10:31, the company's license to use the property terminated. At 10:37, my family learned I was done being useful. My mother called first. I let it ring. Grant called twice, then texted, "What did you do?" Lauren sent a question mark, followed by 7 panicked lines about client expectations. My father left a voicemail in the calm voice he used for donors, bankers, and people he planned to threaten later. "Abigail, there appears to be confusion regarding the cabin. Call me before you make this worse." 9 minutes later, he called again. "You had no right to sell family property." I opened the family group chat and typed one message. The cabin was never family property. It belonged to me under Grandpa's will. The sale is complete. Questions about the deed, business accounts, bank documents, or signatures I did not write should go to Hannah Price. Grant responded first. "Signatures you did not write? Are you accusing Dad of fraud?" "I am describing documents submitted to a bank," I wrote, "with my name, without my authorization." Lauren called it a shortcut. She said everyone knew the cabin belonged to the family emotionally. She said she had already shown Reed Ridge Lodge concepts to investors, and that destroying the project would ruin her credibility. That was the first thing I had not known. Lauren had not merely marketed retreat weekends. She had been using fake approval to attract private investors to a property she did not own. My sister had sold my future in preview slides. By noon, the collapse had spread. Vendors tried to process payments and received restriction notices. The medical device company learned Whitaker Legacy Retreats did not control the July venue and suspended its contract. A bank investigator asked Hannah whether my driver's license copy had been used without permission. At 2:17 p.m., Lauren deleted 22 promotional posts from her business pages. At 3:40, my mother texted, "Do you understand your father could lose everything he built?" I stared at that sentence for a long time. She did not ask if I was scared. She did not ask how it felt to see my signature copied by someone I shared holidays with. She did not ask why my property had been pledged behind my back. Her first concern was that the people who gambled with my name might now have to pay with theirs. That told me where I stood. The next morning, my building manager called to say 4 people were in the lobby demanding access to my floor. I knew exactly who they were. I asked security to place them in the residence conference room, where the cameras recorded audio at the entrance and video from 3 angles. I arrived with Hannah on speaker, my red binder in one hand and my grandfather's cassette recorder in the other. My father hated the binder immediately. "This is a family discussion," he said, nodding toward my phone. Hannah answered before I could. It became a legal discussion when someone submitted forged signatures to a federally insured bank. My mother flinched at the word forged. Grant stayed standing behind a chair, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot. Lauren wore a cream cashmere sweater, and the wounded expression she used when consequences arrived faster than excuses. My father sat at the head of a table that did not belong to him and began telling the version of reality he expected us to occupy. According to him, the cabin had always been treated as shared property. According to him, Grandpa put it in my name only because I was unmarried and needed protection. According to him, the family had increased the value, maintained the place, furnished it, promoted it, and relied on it. Therefore, my sale was legally possible, but morally fraudulent. Hannah asked one question: which maintenance invoices were paid by the family personally? My mother opened a folder full of receipts for throw pillows, linens, wine racks, landscaping, and 2 leather chairs. I opened mine: property taxes, insurance, septic replacement, roof repair, shoreline stabilization, electrical work after the 2019 freeze, fire mitigation, dock reconstruction, total out-of-pocket expenses over 11 years, $214,680. The company had paid for staging items and client atmosphere. I had paid to keep the building alive. The room changed temperature. Lauren pushed her own binder forward. Inside were renderings of Reed Ridge Lodge, more elaborate than the bank packet. My cabin stood at the center like a stolen heart. 12 suites, a conference pavilion, a spa building, a chef's kitchen where Grandpa's recording room used to be. My name appeared on page 4 as landowner, with a note reading, "Owner approval in process." "Did investors see this?" I asked. Lauren swallowed. "It was conceptual." "Did investors see my name?" "Only as a formality." "That is not an answer." "Yes," she snapped. "They saw your name." Grant took over because panic makes golden children generous with blame. He said the company had spent almost $500,000 preparing for expansion. Without the cabin, July would collapse. 2 other corporate clients might cancel. Refund clauses would activate. The bank restrictions could push the company into insolvency. He said 47 jobs depended on me acting like a decent human being. I looked at Hannah's face on my phone screen. She looked bored. "How many of those 47 are full-time employees?" she asked. No one answered. My mother finally whispered, 13. The rest were independent contractors hired per event. My father had rounded guilt upward. Then Hannah shared the bank's temporary credit breakdown. Only $116,000 related to venue preparation. $142,300 paid overdue payroll taxes. $68,000 covered leases on 2 luxury SUVs used by my father and Grant. Lauren had received $52,000 in branding and development fees. My mother had transferred $36,500 into an account labeled Family Reimbursement. The cabin was not their dream. It was their rescue raft. My father slammed his palm on the table. The sound cracked through the room, sharp enough that security looked through the glass wall. I did not move. He told me to call the buyer, return the money, and say I had acted under emotional stress. I told him the deed had recorded. He said they could buy it back. I told him the easement was permanent. Lauren's face went pale when she understood that commercial development was not paused. It was dead. Then my father did the cruelest thing he could still afford. He said, "Your grandfather would be ashamed of you." I opened the cassette recorder. The tape hissed. Grandpa's voice filled the conference room, frail but unmistakable. "If Charles or anyone else ever tells Abby that protecting herself is betrayal, they are proving why the property is hers alone. She may keep it, sell it, give it away, or burn it down if the law allows. No one else has earned a vote." My mother covered her mouth. Grant looked at the carpet. Lauren closed her eyes. My father's expression did not soften. He looked furious that a dead man had contradicted him in front of witnesses. That was very Whitaker of him. After they left, my mother remained behind. Her mascara had gathered beneath her eyes, but for once she did not look like a victim. She looked like someone standing beside the wreckage of a house she had helped wire for fire and finally smelling smoke. "Did you ever feel loved by us?" she asked. I told her the truth. Sometimes, when loving me did not cost anyone access to what I had. 2 days later, Red Pine denied the credit application and referred the forged authorization packet to its internal fraud counsel. Because the bank was federally insured and the documents crossed electronic channels, the matter did not remain a private family embarrassment. The company could operate only through a monitored account. Transfers to family members required review. The IRS inquiry, which had been sleeping quietly in a file marked payroll tax delinquency, woke up with teeth. My father told relatives I had sabotaged him. He said I sold the cabin below market out of jealousy. He said I reported the company because Grant and Lauren were more successful. He said the bank had overreacted to a paperwork misunderstanding. He did not mention the signatures. Men like my father do not lie by accident. They build weather systems and call the rain unfortunate. I responded to every relative the same way. The property was mine under a recorded will. I sold it after learning it had been used in an unauthorized collateral application. I will not discuss active legal matters. Most people disappeared. One did not. My great-aunt Marjorie, Grandpa's sister and the original executor, called me from Spokane. Her voice sounded like dust, coffee, and judgment. She said Grandpa had left a sealed envelope with the will, marked to be opened only if anyone challenged my ownership. Hannah retrieved it from Marjorie's safe deposit box. Inside were a handwritten letter, bank records from 2008, and a promissory note for $190,000 my father had borrowed from Grandpa after a convention contract failed. The debt had been forgiven. In exchange, my father signed an agreement stating he had no present or future ownership interest in the Priest Lake property and would never claim the cabin as family collateral. He had known for 18 years that the cabin was mine. He had signed away even the lie he later told the bank. That changed everything. The letter hurt worse. Grandpa wrote that he originally intended to divide the cabin among all 3 grandchildren. He changed his mind after watching my father and Grant pressure me at 22 to guarantee a business loan with a small inheritance from my grandmother. I refused. My family excluded me from Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter that year. Grandpa saw it. He left me the cabin because I knew how to say no. Hannah forwarded the agreement to the bank investigator. At 4:12 p.m. that same day, Grant appeared at my hospital network office. Security stopped him in the lobby. I agreed to meet him in a public consultation room that smelled like hand sanitizer, old carpet, and vending machine coffee. He looked less like an heir than a man who had opened the wrong door and found weather inside. "Dad wants to sue you," he said. "For what?" "Interference, emotional damages, business destruction." Hannah would enjoy that complaint. He rubbed both hands over his face. 3 clients had canceled. One wanted a $310,000 deposit returned. Another had discovered that Whitaker Legacy Retreats advertised 5 venues it did not own or exclusively control. The company attorney had told them a lawsuit against me could expose every misrepresentation in discovery. Then I asked the question he feared. "Who signed my name?" Grant stared at the table for 17 seconds. I counted. At work, seconds matter. In families, too. Lauren copied it. According to him, Dad told Lauren I had verbally approved the financing and that the signature was just to keep the bank timeline moving. Lauren used my driver's license from old insurance paperwork and traced my signature from a tax authorization I had signed years earlier. Grant saw the document later. He knew it was fake. He stayed quiet because the temporary credit would save the company and because he had already promised clients access he did not have. "Did Mom know?" I asked. She suspected. That sentence sat between us like a body. Grant leaned forward. "Please don't press charges." "That decision may not belong to me." "What do you want?" His question was honest in the worst way. He still believed every boundary was a negotiation, and every wound had a settlement amount. I looked at my brother, the confident child, the heir, the son who got speeches and second chances and clean introductions. "I wanted you to tell the truth before consequences arrived," I said. "You waited until they reached your door." Lauren called that evening without knowing Grant had confessed. First, she denied copying the signature. Then she called it administrative. Then she blamed Dad. Then she cried and said she had spent her whole life trying to remain useful to him. I understood that fear. I had lived beside it. But fear does not turn forgery into loyalty. You could have said no, I told her. So could you, she whispered. You could have warned us. I warned you for 11 years, every time I said the cabin was mine. The final meeting happened in a private room at a mediation center downtown. Outside, snow melted into gray slush along the curb. Inside, the hallway smelled like floor wax, burnt coffee, and nervous money. My father's attorney had proposed a settlement. I would sign a statement calling the loan application an internal misunderstanding, and in return, the family would abandon any civil claim and stop criticizing me publicly. They were offering to admit I owned the cabin if I helped them conceal how they tried to steal it. I refused before sitting down. My mother arrived separately from my father. Grant sat beside the company attorney and looked 10 years older. Lauren came with her husband Ryan, but left an empty chair between them. My father entered last, wearing a navy overcoat and the expression of a man who believed rooms still belonged to him if he arrived confidently enough. Hannah placed the red binder on the table. First came the deed, then Grandpa's will, then the license agreement, then the forged consent forms, then the bank packet, then the 2008 agreement proving my father had no claim, then the spreadsheet showing temporary credit diverted to taxes, vehicles, family transfers, and consulting fees. No speech, no trembling, just paper. Paper has a sound when it ends a dynasty. My father said any mistakes were made to protect a company that supported the family. Hannah said the company's losses came from representations it could not support. The company attorney explained the bank would avoid accelerating unrelated debts only if Whitaker Legacy Retreats repaid the temporary credit, accepted an independent audit, cooperated with the investigation, and removed current family leadership. My father laughed once. That company is mine. Not if creditors decide otherwise, the attorney said. For the first time in my life, I watched someone interrupt my father with reality. My mother read from a prepared statement. Her voice shook, but she did not hide behind tears. She admitted she knew the company intended to use the cabin in the loan application. She believed my father had permission, but when she saw the signature, she knew something was wrong and chose silence because the company owed taxes and she feared losing the house. I called silence peace, she said. It was participation. That was the first honest sentence I had heard from her in years. Grant admitted he had exaggerated projected retreat revenue and listed tentative client conversations as confirmed contracts. Lauren admitted she copied the signature, used my name in investor materials, and created an email appearing to come from me approving preliminary architectural plans. Ryan interrupted only once. Tell her what you told me. Lauren covered her face. Ryan looked at me instead. She told an investor you would be given a minority interest once development started because you were too cautious to understand the opportunity. I asked Lauren, what percentage? She could not answer. My father accused Ryan of betraying his wife. Ryan removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table. Protecting people from consequences is what this family calls love, he said. I'm done participating. Lauren made a sound like air leaving a tire. No one comforted her. Near the end, my father turned to me. His face was gray now, but his voice still searched for command. You enjoyed this. I thought carefully before answering. I had not enjoyed my mother's fear. I had not enjoyed thinking about 13 employees wondering whether they would get paid. I had not enjoyed watching Lauren shake or Grant beg. But I had felt relief when the bank stopped the loan, when the easement recorded, when my property could never again be used as bait. I enjoyed being free of your control, I said. That is not the same as enjoying your suffering. He stared at me with pure contempt. You destroyed this family. I stood and picked up the red binder. No, I stopped letting this family destroy me. The federal part did not arrive with flashing lights. It arrived through letters, interviews, document requests, tax notices, and quiet meetings where people in gray suits asked very precise questions. That is how real consequences often enter. Not like thunder. Like a printer warming up in the next room. Within 3 months, Whitaker Legacy Retreats accepted restructuring under an independent managing director. The company sold the SUVs, canceled the resort division, repaid client deposits through a supervised plan, and negotiated payroll tax obligations with penalties that made my father look physically ill. 13 employees kept their jobs. The family no longer controlled payroll, accounts, or strategy. My father lost the company first, then the house, then the version of himself that required an audience. He resigned as managing director, lost his expense account, and sold the Boise Colonial after the audit found years of unpaid employment taxes and improper family reimbursements. He avoided prison by cooperating late, paying restitution, and accepting a plea agreement tied to false bank statements and tax violations. He received probation, community service, and financial monitoring. For a man who measured worth by control, that sentence was not mercy. It was public gravity. Grant lost his development role and took a lower-paying sales job in Meridian. His reputation survived, but the executive future he had treated as birthright did not. He sent one apology without asking me to intervene. It was short. It included the sentence, "I let Dad's approval matter more than your rights." I did not forgive him that day, but I kept the letter. Lauren's real estate license was suspended pending review of misleading investment materials. Ryan filed for separation. She moved into a rented duplex near Nampa and began administrative work for a property management office, far from luxury decks and staged wine glasses. 6 months later, she sent a handwritten apology. No performance, no dramatic language, just truth, finally small enough to fit on paper. My mother moved into an apartment with beige carpet and 2 lamps from storage. We spoke twice in the first 6 months, 20 minutes each, timed because boundaries need clocks when guilt knows old roots. She started therapy. She stopped asking me to forgive people for the sake of harmony. Once, near the end of a call, she said, "I taught you that being loved meant being easy to use." I did not know what to say, so I said, "Yes." The cabin still stands at Priest Lake, but it is not a stage for Whitaker perfection anymore. Researchers stay there during nesting season. Local students visit to learn about shoreline conservation. Grandpa's recording cabinet remains in the back room, and Northern Ridge Land Trust allowed me to donate copies of his tapes to a regional archive. The building survived. The entitlement did not. I bought a small townhouse near the Boise River with a porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a pot of lavender. I reduced my hospital hours and started a nonprofit workshop for emergency workers, teaching them how to organize wills, deeds, insurance policies, account access, and powers of attorney before crisis comes. People think disaster preparedness means generators and sandbags. Sometimes it means knowing who can legally sign your name. Sometimes it means knowing who should never get the chance. Was selling the cabin revenge? Partly. I would be lying if I said I felt nothing when their plan collapsed. But revenge was not the deepest outcome. The deepest outcome was silence inside my own chest where panic used to live. Their consequences no longer required my destruction. That is freedom. My father invited me out of pity because he believed I was still the least powerful person in the room. 5 days later, the cabin was sold, the fraudulent financing collapsed, and every secret attached to it began surfacing at once. They called it betrayal because they had mistaken my obedience for consent. I now know the difference. Blood does not create family by itself. Loyalty does. Love does not need forged signatures. Love does not need your driver's license copied from an old insurance file. Love does not require you to donate your future so someone else can pretend they earned theirs. The bridge I burned was not the path back to my family. It was the road they kept using to reach me, take from me, and leave without consequences. Closing that road did not make me cruel. It made me whole. So tell me honestly, if the people closest to you used your name, your property, and your silence to build their future, would you give them one more chance? Or would you do what Abby did and finally protect your own peace? Comment your age and where you are watching from. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story.